The key felt unbelievably heavy in my palm. I stood in the marble lobby of our building, my building now, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as my husband of 7 years pressed the intercom buzzer for the third time. His finger tapped it with mounting desperation, that frantic energy that arises when reality hasn't quite caught up with consequences. The intercom on the wall beside me remained silent, flashing with each ring. I didn't move toward it. Welcome to Betty's Stories. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. From the 12th floor, through that flawless glass, I had watched him arrive in a cab 20 minutes ago. No luxury black SUV. That was the first clue he noticed. He stood on the sidewalk for a full minute, staring at the empty space in the resident parking area, even lifting a hand to his head in that universal gesture of confusion. Then he grabbed his leather travel bag, the one I had bought him for our 5th anniversary, and strode toward the entrance with the confidence that comes from a man who never imagined his foundation could collapse. Now, that assurance was cracking. His cell phone was pressed to his ear. My phone vibrated in my pocket for the 7th time in 3 minutes. I pulled it out and saw his name, husband, not his actual name, which he no longer deserved, flashing on the screen. I'd changed it this morning, sitting in my lawyer's office right after signing the documents that changed everything else. The buzzer rang again, longer this time. Through the glass, I saw Gary, our concierge, my concierge, speaking to him. Gary's posture was apologetic, but his hands were held up in that firm, universal gesture. I'm sorry, but I can't do anything. He was following my instructions exactly. I'd spoken to him this morning, and the building management, and everyone who needed to know. My husband's face was shifting. I watched it happen in real time, even from this distance. Confusion gave way to something sharper. His jaw clenched, his shoulders squaring. He was saying something to Gary, gesturing toward the elevators, toward the home he'd left 3 days ago, the home he believed he was returning to, as always. My phone vibrated again. Then again. The messages came in rapid succession. I didn't need to read them to know what they said. Where are you? What is going on? Why won't they let me in? Call me back. I remembered the dinner party 6 weeks ago, the candlelight reflecting in the crystal glasses, the way his eyes had lit up when he spoke about her. It was the specific cadence of his voice when he uttered those words that detonated everything I had built my life upon. I remembered what I discovered afterward, the emails, the bank statements, the truth that had been living in my home, sleeping in my bed, eating at my table. I remembered the marriage I had invested everything into, my youth, my trust, my money, my future. And I remembered the woman who was there before that dinner, before she knew, before she decided that some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness, they deserve precision. My husband was shouting. I couldn't hear him through the thick glass, but I saw his mouth moving. His free hand cut through the air in sharp, aggressive movements. Gary stepped back a little, and I mentally noted I'd be giving him a generous bonus for this. Another staff member approached, Darius, the evening shift supervisor. They were handling it exactly as I had coached. Call security if he becomes aggressive. Do not engage in dialogue beyond the script. I'm sorry, sir, but you are no longer listed as a resident or an authorized guest at this address. I turned from the window and walked toward the elevator bank. My heels struck the marble in an even, measured rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Slow, calm, controlled. Behind me, the buzzing stopped, then started again. My phone continued its desperate vibration. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the penthouse. As the doors closed, I caught a final glimpse of the lobby, the intercom still flashing red. The elevator began its smooth ascent, and I closed my eyes. This wasn't the end of the story. This was the point where I took back everything he thought he could take from me. But to understand how I got here, standing in this elevator, my husband locked out of the home he considered partially his life about to crumble in ways he couldn't yet imagine. You need to understand where it started. You need to understand the dinner, and you need to understand that the woman who walked into that restaurant 6 weeks ago died at that table. The woman in this elevator was a completely different person, one he should never have created. I met him on a Tuesday. That detail matters because I've always been suspicious of grand romantic beginnings, the cinematic, cute meet stories people create, retrospectively polishing mundane moments into destiny. Our meeting was a Tuesday afternoon at a professional development seminar. We both reached for the same stale croissant during a coffee break. Mundane, forgettable, except he smiled at me. That slow, unfolding smile that transformed his whole face into something warm and said, "I think the universe is telling us we have the same taste in mediocre baked goods." I laughed, a real laugh, not the polite little chuckle you give strangers, but a genuine burst of amusement that caught me off guard. At 31, I had navigated enough disappointing dates and sluggish relationships to have developed a thick shell of cynicism around anything that resembled romance. But something about his self-deprecation, the way he immediately broke the croissant in half and offered me the larger portion, made me think, maybe this is different. We talked through the rest of the break. Then we skipped the next session and continued the conversation over coffee at a neighboring cafe. Then dinner. Then he walked me to my car. And somewhere between the parking garage elevator and my vehicle, he asked for my number with a sweet nervousness that seemed incompatible with his confident exterior. "I know we just met," he said, shoving his hands in his pockets, "but I have a feeling if I let you drive away without getting a way to contact you, I'll kick myself for the next month." I gave him my number. That was 8 years ago. I tell you this because you have to understand that I loved him. Deeply, completely, with that total vulnerability that only comes when you decide someone is safe. When you look at a person and think, yes, I choose you, and I trust you with the most fragile parts of myself. Our romance progressed gradually. He was a consultant at a mid-sized marketing firm, ambitious and charming, the type of man who remembered small details about your day and sent you articles he thought you'd find interesting. I was a real estate lawyer, pragmatic and cautious, the kind of person who double reads every contract and never made an impulsive decision, except with him. When he proposed 10 months later on a random Sunday morning while we were making breakfast, no ring yet, just him suddenly putting down the spatula and saying, "I don't want to wait anymore. Marry me." I said, "Yes," before my brain had time to catch up. We married 4 months later in a modest ceremony that felt perfect because it was ours. His family flew in, my mother cried. Everything was exactly as it should have been. The cracks came later. All cracks do, but first there were 3 good years, maybe 4 if I'm generous with my memory. We bought a small apartment together. I made partner at my firm. He got promoted. We talked about children in that vague someday way that couples do when they still enjoy just being two. We traveled. Barcelona, Tokyo, a rainy road trip through Ireland that we laughed about every day. We fought. I thought we were building something. I didn't realize I was the only one holding the blueprints. The money came into my life when I was 36, an inheritance from my father's aunt, a woman I barely knew but who had apparently followed my career with quiet pride. She left me everything: her estate, her investment portfolio, her real property. It was substantial, life-changing, the kind of thing that shifts your entire paradigm of what's possible. $5 million after taxes. I remember sitting in the probate lawyer's office, staring at the document and feeling like I was looking at a number from someone else's life. My husband came with me. He held my hand during the reading of the will, rubbed my back when I unexpectedly cried, not from grief, but from the overwhelming strangeness of it all. "What do you want to do with it?" he asked me that evening, both of us still processing. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Invest most of it, I guess. Maybe we can finally buy a real home. Something that's actually ours, not a cardboard-walled apartment." His eyes lit up. "A house, a home," I corrected. "For us. For our future." We made love that night. with a tenderness that felt like a renewal, like we were reconnecting with something we'd allowed to drift away. In the afterglow, his arm around me, he whispered into my hair, "We're going to build something amazing. I can feel it." I believed him. God, I believed him. I was cautious with the money. Being careful was my nature, and my professional life taught me to be prudent with assets. I consulted financial advisors, tax attorneys, investment specialists. I created trusts and accounts and meticulously structured everything to maximize growth while minimizing risk. The home was first. We found it together, a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a green neighborhood with good schools, even though we didn't have kids yet. Hardwood floors and a kitchen with an island, a backyard with mature oak trees. It was perfect. I bought it in my name alone, not because I didn't trust him, not consciously, but because the money was mine, and I was a lawyer, and I knew the statistics. I knew that asset protection wasn't about love. It was about being smart. My colleagues had all advised the same. Keep the inheritance separate. Don't co-mingle funds. It's not romantic, but it's practical. At the time, he seemed okay with it. "Whatever makes you comfortable," he said, signing the documents that affirmed he had no claim on the property. "It's your money, I get it." We moved in on a Saturday in May. I remember because the lilacs in the front yard were blooming, and their scent filled every room. We christened every room as we brought in boxes that day. Dancing in the empty living room, ordering takeout and sitting on the kitchen floor, making love in our bedroom before we'd even assembled the bed frame. This was our home, our future, the foundation of everything we were building together. I meticulously renovated it over the next year, upgraded the bathrooms, refinished the floors, and modernized the kitchen. I used my inheritance for all of it, keeping scrupulous records. My money, my investment. He contributed to the monthly utility bills, groceries, and day-to-day expenses. But the house was mine. I thought I was being clever. I didn't realize I was building my own lifeboat. His career stalled for a while, not a failure, but a gentle dead end, which happens to men in their late 30s who haven't broken through to the next level. While I was making partner and handling high-profile real estate deals, he was still at the same firm, doing the same work, watching younger colleagues leapfrog past him. It created a tension between us that we never named out loud. He started making comments, small ones at first. "Must be nice to have a safety net," when I mentioned my investment portfolio. "Some of us have to work for everything we have," when I bought myself a new car with my bonus. Little jabs he delivered with a smile, as if they were jokes, but they landed heavy. I told myself he was just stressed, insecure, going through something. I tried to be supportive, offered to help with his resume, use my professional connections, introduce him to people who could boost his career. He agreed sometimes, bristled others. "I don't need you to rescue me," he snapped once when I suggested he talk to a recruiter I knew. "I'm not trying to rescue you," I said, confused. "I'm trying to help." Same thing. I didn't argue. I was learning there were topics that made him defensive, and his career was chief among them. So I backed off, gave him space, focused on my work, and tried to make home a place where he could feel successful, valued, needed. I became very good at making him feel big. I didn't notice I was making myself smaller. Looking back, from the other side of everything that happened, I can see the pattern forming. The way he withdrew when I landed a new client, the way his compliments came with caveats. "That's great, babe," though I'm sure half the success is just being in the right place at the right time. The way he sometimes introduced me at parties as Aisha, my wife, the lawyer, with just enough emphasis on the article to make it sound like a category, not an achievement. But at the time, I didn't see it. Or maybe I did, and told myself I was being too sensitive. Maybe I was too busy, too focused on my own achievements, too determined to believe in the marriage I had committed to. Maybe I didn't want to see that the foundation I thought we were building together was really one I was constructing alone, while he stood by, watching with increasing resentment. The 7-year mark came and went. We didn't celebrate. Both of us said we were too busy, though we'd always made time for anniversaries before. He started traveling more for work. I was consumed with a complicated commercial real estate deal that ate up 80 hours of my week. We were two people living in the same beautiful house, sleeping in the same bed, but somehow inhabiting completely different lives. "We need to take a vacation," I said one evening when we were both eating separately at different times, me at the kitchen island with my laptop, him on the sofa with his phone. "Once this deal closes, just the two of us. Maybe that retreat up in the Berkshires we always talked about." "Sure," he said, not looking up. "Sounds good." We never booked it. And then there was the dinner party, the invitation that would detonate everything I knew about my marriage, my husband, and the life I was living. An invitation I almost didn't accept. The restaurant was the kind of place where the lighting was engineered to make everyone look beautiful and the prices weren't listed on the menu. I dressed carefully that evening, the way you do when you know you'll be in a room full of people who size you up in the first 3 seconds. A deep blue silk dress, form-fitting but not tight, understated jewelry, my hair styled to look effortless, but which took 20 minutes to achieve. My reflection in the hall mirror before we left showed a woman who looked successful, elegant, and composed. I didn't realize I was dressing for my own funeral. The dinner was hosted by Blake and Savannah Sterling, a couple my husband knew from early in his career. Blake was now a senior VP at some tech company with a name composed of lowercase letters and implying innovation. Savannah was in PR, the type of woman who calls everyone darling and makes you feel simultaneously wanted and judged. "We absolutely have to go," my husband had said when the invitation came. "Blake might have contacts for me, and Savannah knows everyone." So I cleared my calendar, rescheduled a client meeting, and put on my armor of silk and politeness. The restaurant was downtown, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs, with that industrial chic aesthetic that costs a fortune to look unfinished. We were directed to a private dining room in the back, where a long table was set for 12. Candles flickered in the center. Glasses caught the light. It was beautiful, with the calculated beauty that expensive things possess. The other guests were already mingling, holding cocktails and performing the social dance of professionals at networking events disguised as friendly gatherings. I recognized a few faces, people from my husband's industry, some I'd met at prior functions. And then I saw her. She was standing by the window, laughing at something Blake was saying. Even before my husband's entire body tensed next to me, I knew the way you sometimes know something by instinct, penetrating the bone and bypassing rational thought. It was Simone, the ex-girlfriend, the relationship that, according to the scant details he'd shared early in our relationship, had ended because the timing was wrong and they wanted different things. Ancient history, I had thought. Everyone has exes. It meant nothing, except that the way he was looking at her now meant something. His hand on my lower back froze, not recoiled, but simply stopped, as if all the electricity in his body had momentarily flowed elsewhere. I felt it, the shift, the sudden absence of his focus, even though physically he was still beside me. "You didn't mention she would be here," I said quietly. "I didn't know." His voice was strange, tight. Savannah swooped in, all air kisses and perfume, drawing us into the room and making introductions. "You remember Simone, don't you?" she said to my husband with that casual cruelty women like Savannah specialize in. "She's just moved back to New York City. Isn't that marvelous? Such a reunion." "Marvelous," I echoed, locking my professional smile into place. Simone turned to us, and I saw her clearly for the first time. She was beautiful, not in the standard way magazines or movies teach us to recognize, but in something more unsettling. She had an almost ethereal quality, pale skin, dark eyes, a certain quiet intensity that commanded attention. Her dress was a simple, restrained black, which somehow made every other woman in the room look like they were trying too hard. "Hello," she said. Her voice was low, a little husky. "You must be Aisha. I've heard wonderful things about you." "All lies, I'm sure," I said, with an ease I didn't feel. She laughed. "My husband? Never." We migrated toward the table. The universe, or Savannah's seating chart, which amounted to the same thing, placed Simone directly opposite us, slightly to the left of my husband. Perfect sightline. I was seated to his right. I watched him settle his napkin onto his lap with excessive concentration. The first course arrived. Conversation flowed around the table, that specific blend of professional shop talk and personal anecdotes that happens at these dinners. I participated when appropriate, asked the right questions, laughed at the necessary moments. But I was hyper-aware of my husband beside me. He was different, animated in a way I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. He was funny, charming, leaning forward when he spoke, his eyes shining. He was the man I had met 8 years ago at that conference, the one who made me laugh about a stale croissant, and all that energy was being directed across the table. "So, Simone," Blake was saying, "tell everyone about your new project. It's absolutely fascinating." She demurred modestly, but eventually allowed herself to be persuaded, describing her work. Something in sustainable architecture, designing eco-friendly buildings for developing nations. It was genuinely impressive. She spoke with passion and intellect, and I found myself understanding why the room leaned in when she spoke. "That is incredible," my husband said, and there was a note in his voice I couldn't immediately place. Pride, admiration, something else. "It's meaningful work," Simone said, looking at him. "I realized a long time ago that life is too short to do things that don't matter. You taught me that, by the way." The table gave a collective, "Ah." I took a large gulp of wine. The conversation continued. More courses arrived. The wine flowed freely, slowly, imperceptibly. I watched my husband fall in love with his ex-girlfriend in real time, sitting right next to his wife. Implicitly, he didn't touch her, didn't ignore me. But there was an energy between them, a current that anyone who cared to notice could feel. They had their in-jokes, shared references, the shorthand that comes after an intimate history. "Remember that time in Costa Rica?" Simone said at one point, laughing. "With the monkey?" My husband actually threw his head back and roared with laughter, a full-body expression of delight I had almost forgotten he was capable of. Oh God, I blocked that out. The trauma was too great. Everyone was charmed by it, asking for the story, which they recounted in tandem, finishing each other's sentences, a perfectly choreographed duet of shared memory. It was a funny story. I laughed with everyone else. I hadn't known they went to Costa Rica together. He had never mentioned it. But why should he have? It was before me. Ancient history. Except it didn't feel ancient, not the way he looked at her. The main course arrived. Some perfectly cooked fish, the taste of which I didn't register. The conversation broke into smaller clusters. Savannah was now talking to me about a charitable gala she was organizing, and I answered on autopilot, tracking the conversation happening to my left. My husband was asking Simone about her life, where she'd been, what she'd been up to. "I spent the last 5 years abroad," she said, "working on projects in South America, then Southeast Asia." She'd been engaged briefly, but it hadn't worked out. "He was a good man," she said, with a small, sad smile, "but not the one, you know. I guess I always had a very specific idea of what I was looking for." Her eyes flickered to my husband for a moment as she said it, barely a fraction of a second, but I saw it. And he did too. "Well," Blake said, lifting his glass, "we're glad you're back. The city was duller without you." We all drank to that. My hand was steady on the crystal stem. My face was an expression of pleasant agreement. Inside, something was shifting. A tectonic movement for which I didn't yet have words. Dessert came. The table was noisy now, several conversations overlapping. People were relaxed by the wine and the food. I was talking to someone's husband about land use law late in the hour, a discussion I could conduct in my sleep. And then I heard it. My husband's voice, not loud, but distinct in a momentary lull of the surrounding noise. "You know, you've only gotten more beautiful with age. It's hardly fair to us mere mortals." The table laughed. Someone, Savannah, I think, said something about his charm, but I stopped breathing. He was looking at Simone as he said it, directly at her, with an expression of such frank admiration, such unconcealed appreciation, that it felt like being punched in the chest while sitting down. Simone smiled. "You were always a flatterer." "I'm serious," he said, and he was serious. I heard it in his voice. "Some people age. You just get refined, more yourself." "Careful," Simone said, her eyes sparkling. "Your wife might get jealous." All heads turned to me. The moment stretched. I felt my face, the smile that was still there from my previous conversation, now frozen in place like a mask that no longer fit. Everyone waited for me to react, to say something witty or gracious or lighthearted. My husband's hand found my knee under the table, a gentle squeeze of reassurance. "It's just a joke, just a compliment between old friends. Don't be that wife, don't be insecure or jealous or petty." I placed my hand over his and squeezed back. Then I looked at Simone and said with perfect lightness, "Oh, I'm secure enough to admit when my husband is speaking the truth. You really do look lovely." More laughter. The moment passed. The conversation moved on. His hand left my knee. The rest of the dinner blurred. We said our goodbyes, promised to get together soon, which I knew would never happen. I hugged Savannah and thanked her for a lovely evening. I even hugged Simone. Two women embracing briefly while my husband watched. "It was so nice to finally meet you," she whispered in my ear. "He's lucky to have you." The words were right. The delivery was perfect, but they landed like a threat. We walked to the car in silence. My husband was driving. I stared out the window at the streaking city lights, feeling like I was underwater, everything muffled and distant. "That was nice," he finally said. His voice was casual. "Good food. Hope it wasn't weird that Simone was there." Should it have been? No, of course not. Just, exes can be awkward. I turned to look at him. His profile was intermittently lit by the streetlights, familiar and suddenly foreign. "You told her she was beautiful." "What? Oh." He shrugged, eyes on the road. "I was just being polite. She's been through a lot." "You said she was more beautiful than she used to be." "Did I?" He sounded genuinely unsure, and that was somehow worse, that he could say something that cut into my memory and not even recall the exact words. "I was probably just trying to be friendly. You know how those events are." I knew. I knew about professional pleasantries, social lubricants, and meaningless compliments that smoothed over gatherings. This hadn't been that. But I also knew that if I pressed, if I turned this into a thing, I would be the problem. The insecure wife, the jealous woman who couldn't handle her husband being polite to an ex. So I said nothing. We drove home in silence, went through our nightly routine. He fell asleep almost immediately, his breathing deep and even beside me. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, replaying the dinner in my mind. His face when he first saw her, the light in his eyes when he spoke to her, the way he looked at her when he called her beautiful. Truly looked, the way you look at something precious, the way he hadn't looked at me in years. Something had cracked inside me during that dinner. A space was created where questions could grow. And as I lay there in the dark, listening to my husband sleep peacefully beside me, those questions began to take root. Who was this man I married? What was this life I had built? And why did I suddenly feel like a stranger in my own home? I didn't have the answers yet, but I was about to start looking for them, and what I found would change everything. I didn't confront him the next morning or the morning after. I watched. It's amazing what you notice when you actually pay attention. All the little things that had been happening in the periphery of my consciousness suddenly snapped into focus, as if I had adjusted a lens from blurry to sharp. He was on his phone more. Not a lot more. He was always glued to it. But there was a quality to the way he held it now. Guarded, slightly angled, and he took it with him everywhere. The bathroom, the kitchen, out to grab a glass of water, step out to check the mail. "Everything all right?" I asked one evening, 3 days after the dinner, when he got up from the sofa for the 4th time to check a notification. "Yeah, just work stuff." But he was smiling when he typed, a soft, private smile of a man involved in a conversation he enjoyed. Work didn't make him smile. So I started noticing the details, the way he dressed better in the mornings, even on days he worked from home, a new cologne I hadn't bought him, a sudden interest in going to the gym, which he had abandoned 2 years ago. "You look good," I said one morning, and I meant it. He did look good, energetic, alive, and that should have made me happy. "Thanks," he said, kissing my cheek on his way out the door. "Just trying to take better care of myself." For her, I didn't say. You're doing it for her. But I didn't know it yet, not for sure. And I was always a person who needed proof, concrete facts, before leveling an accusation. That was the lawyer in me. Suspicion is not proof. A feeling is not a case. So I started gathering evidence. It began small. I paid attention to his patterns. He used to be careless with his phone, leaving it on the desk while he showered, on the nightstand while he slept. But now, it was always screened down, always password protected. He had changed the code. I noticed when I went to use it to call my own phone, which I had misplaced, something I'd done 100 times before. "What's your new code?" I asked casually. A microsecond of hesitation. "Oh, I changed it for security. Here, what do you need?" He unlocked it himself and handed it to me, then stood nearby while I called my phone. When I found it and hung up, he immediately took his phone back. That's when I knew, not exactly what, but that something was there. I could have asked him directly. I probably should have. A healthier version of me in a healthier marriage would have said, "I feel us drifting. Something is wrong. Can we talk?" But I was afraid of the answer. Or maybe I was afraid that he would lie. Or worse, that he would tell the truth, and I'd have to deal with it before I was ready. So instead, I did what I do best. I investigated. The phone bill was easy to check. We were on a shared plan, and I had account access. I pulled the records for the last month and started scrolling through the call log. There were the usual numbers, work colleagues, his mother, and then one number that appeared with increasing frequency, especially in the evenings and late at night. Calls for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, while he was supposedly working in his home office. I was in bed, reading, while we lived our separate lives under one roof. I could have called that number. Part of me wanted to, but I already knew whose voice would answer. Instead, I checked our credit card statements. Another shared account we used for household expenses and day-to-day purchases. I had online access. I usually paid the bills anyway. There were charges I didn't recognize. Flowers sent 3 weeks ago. I hadn't received flowers. A restaurant I had never been to on a Tuesday when he said he was working late. Another restaurant, a wine bar, a coffee shop, all in a neighborhood on the opposite side of town. Each charge was small enough to be unnoticed on its own, but together they painted a picture I didn't want to see. I sat at my desk in our home office, my office, in the house I bought, and stared at the spreadsheet I had created. Calls, texts. I couldn't see the content, but I could see the volume. Charges, the chronology of a betrayal laid out in data points. My hands were shaking. I closed the laptop and sat in the silence of the room. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window. Dust motes floated in the gold light. Everything looked normal, even beautiful. This home I created, this life I built. It was all a set for a play I hadn't realized I was acting in. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I never called out sick. My assistant sounded genuinely concerned. "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" "Just a stomach bug," I lied. "I'll be fine tomorrow." My husband had already left for work. I waited 30 minutes after he left, then went into his office. I felt like a criminal, rooting through his things. In 8 years of marriage, I had never snooped, never felt the need to. Trust was supposed to be the bedrock of what we had, but foundations crumble. His office was neat. He was fastidious about his workspace. The desk organized, folders labeled, books alphabetized. I started with the obvious places: desk drawers, file cabinet, nothing incriminating, just work documents, old tax returns, appliance warranties. Then I checked his briefcase, the one he took to the office every day, but for some reason had left home today. In the inner pocket, tucked into the business card slot, I found a receipt. Hotel. From last week, the night he said he had a late dinner with a client. One-night room charge. Check-in, 7 o'clock p.m. Check-out, 11 o'clock p.m. 4 hours. I stood in his office, holding the receipt in hands that felt numb. 4 hours. Not a mistake, not a misunderstanding. 4 hours in a hotel room downtown, when he could have been home in 20 minutes. The paper crumpled slightly in my hand. I smoothed it out, took a picture of it with my phone, and placed it back exactly where I found it. Then I sat in his chair and tried to breathe through the tearing sensation in my chest. It wasn't shock. Somewhere deep inside, I had known this since the dinner, maybe earlier. A part of me had registered what was happening even when my conscious mind refused to see it. It was grief. The death of the marriage I thought I had. The death of the man I thought I knew. The death of the future I was striving for. I allowed myself 10 minutes to cry. I timed it, as I had learned to do in my professional life when I needed to process something before getting back to work. 10 minutes to fall apart, then compartmentalize and move forward. When the timer on my phone went off, I wiped my face, went to the bathroom, washed my hands, and splashed cold water on my eyes, looking at myself in the mirror. My face stared back, puffy and red, but familiar. I was still here, still myself, and I was done with being the woman who didn't know. I needed more information. The receipt proved he did something, but not quite what. And I knew from my career that assumptions, even reasonable ones, can fall apart in court. I needed irrefutable evidence. I needed to know the full scale of what I was dealing with. I went back to his office and searched more thoroughly. This time, I was methodical, checking every book for hidden papers, every folder for something misplaced. I found nothing else. Either he was extremely careful, or the bulk of the affair existed digitally. His laptop was password protected, a different one than his phone. I tried a few obvious combinations. Birthdays, our anniversary. Nothing worked. I wasn't a hacker. I couldn't break into it without him knowing, but I knew someone who could. I sat on the floor of his office, my back against his desk, and pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the right name. Caleb Hayes, a technology specialist I had worked with on a digital fraud case last year. He was discreet, brilliant, and owed me a favor. "Hey, Aisha," he answered, surprised. "Long time. What's up?" "I need help," I said. "Personal? Confidential?" There was a pause. Then his voice shifted, becoming professional. "What kind of help?" "I need to gain access to someone's digital communications without their knowledge. I think my husband is having an affair. I need proof before I do anything." Another pause, longer this time. "Are we talking legal or marital?" "Marital. I'm a lawyer, Caleb. I know how this works. I need to know what's going on. I won't use it in court, but I need to know what I'm dealing with." I heard him thinking, "Yeah, I can help with that. Do you have access to any of his devices?" "His laptop, but I don't have the password." "You don't need it. I can set up a program. You'll need to install it while he's not home. It'll take about 10 minutes. After that, it'll mirror all emails, texts, browser history, everything, to a secure server you can access remotely. He'll never know it's there." My stomach churned. Is this legal? In your own home, on a device you co-own? Gray area, but probably defensible. Inadmissible in court, but useful for understanding what you're up against. "That's all I need to know. I'll send you the details. Give me an hour." "Caleb, thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said softly. "You might not like what you find." "I already don't like it. At least this way, I'll know." The program arrived in my email 40 minutes later with detailed instructions. My husband wouldn't be home for several hours. I had the time. I followed Caleb's directions exactly, installing the software onto my husband's laptop, sitting in his chair, in his space, violating his privacy in the exact same manner he had violated our marriage. It felt like justice, and it felt like a fall. When it was done, I closed the laptop, left his office, and went to our bedroom. I lay down on top of the comforter and stared at the ceiling, the same ceiling I'd stared at for nights after the dinner, and waited. My phone would alert me when the program started capturing data. Caleb said it could take a few hours for everything to sync. I needed to be patient. Patience had never been my strong suit, but I had learned something about myself over the last few weeks. I was capable of things I never imagined: deception, observation, that calculated calmness that came from knowing your life is ending and choosing to control exactly how it dies. My phone vibrated, a text from my husband. "How are you feeling? Need me to pick anything up on the way home?" The caring husband, the attentive partner. I typed back, "Much better. See you tonight." And then I waited for the truth to reveal itself. The first email popped up in my mirrored inbox at 3:47 p.m. I was sitting in our living room, laptop on my knees, pretending to review work contracts. In reality, I was refreshing the secure server Caleb set up every 10 minutes for the past 2 hours, watching the files slowly populate: browser history, application data, and finally, the emails. The freshest one came from his sent folder. The recipient was an email address I didn't recognize, but the subject line made my blood run cold. "Tonight." I clicked to open it. "Can't wait to see you at the usual spot. I'll bring the wine this time. You just bring yourself, that's all I need. Him, my husband, flirting with her." I scrolled up to see the full thread. Her replies were there too, syncing in real time as the program captured everything. "You are impossible. Same place, 7:30 p.m. And bring that Malbec you talked about. I want to try the one you raved about. Deal. Wear the blue dress. Self-assured. I'll wear what I want. You'll wear the blue dress because you know how much I love you in it, and you like it when I love you." I felt bile rise in my throat, carefully set the laptop aside, walked to the bathroom, and vomited. When there was nothing left, I rinsed my mouth, washed my face, and returned to the living room, picked up the laptop, and read it again. Then I scrolled further back. The emails went back weeks, months, long before the dinner party. The dinner party hadn't been a beginning, it had been a reunion. They had been communicating for at least 3 months, judging by the earliest email in the thread. Her first message to him was simple: "I'm back in town. Thought you should know." His reply, sent within the hour: "That is the best news I've heard in years. When can I see you?" I read every email, watching their romance unfold in reverse. From today's casual plans to those first cautious messages that still had plausible deniability. "Just coffee? As friends. Such a great catch-up. We should do it again." And then the shift. The messages growing longer, more personal. He shares how he feels stuck in his career, unappreciated at home. She sympathizes, understands, reminds him of who he used to be. "You were always meant for more," she wrote. "I don't think she sees you the way I do. She sees a paycheck and a name on a tax return." He replied, "You see me." I had to stop reading, put the laptop down, go to the kitchen, and pour a glass of water with shaking hands. She sees a paycheck, 7 years of marriage, of partnership, of building a life together. And that's who I was to him. I drank the water, poured another glass, forced myself to breathe, then returned and continued reading. The messages grew more intimate, wistful, sexual, though not explicit. Talk of stolen moments, of feeling alive again, of how this felt right in a way nothing else did. And then, 3 weeks ago, the hotel. "I can't keep doing this halfway," he wrote. "I need all of you." "You have me," she replied. "You always have." The hotel receipt I found matched the date of that exchange. I sat with that knowledge, allowing it to settle into my bones. My husband slept with his ex-girlfriend in a downtown hotel while I was at home, probably working late, completely unaware that my marriage had just died. The program was still syncing. Text messages began to pour in now, hundreds of them, the mundane and the destructive all mixed up. "Thinking of you. Last night was everything. Can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore." That last one stopped me. Until we don't have to hide anymore. I clicked on the thread, reading backward. "When are you going to tell her?" Simone asked 2 weeks ago. "I need to sort out the logistics first. The house is complicated." The house or your feelings? The house is in her name. It's her inheritance. If we divorce, I walk away with nothing. You'll walk away with yourself, with us. Isn't that worth more than property? Of course, but I just need to be smart. Let me handle this my way. In his own words was the truth of who I was to him. Not a wife, not a partner, but an obstacle between him and what he wanted. A financial complication that needed careful navigating. I thought about the documents he signed when I bought the house, the affirmation that it was my separate property. At the time, I thought I was protecting myself. I had no idea how right I was. More messages loaded. I watched them fill the screen with detached curiosity, as if reading about someone else's life. They were planning not just an affair, but a future. Simone was looking at apartments, sending him listings. "For when you're free," she wrote. "Consider it our first place." He responded with heart emojis and promises. They talked about trips they would take together, the life they would have, how much better suited they were than either of them was in their current situations. "She never really understood me," he wrote. "I feel like I've just been pretending for the last few years." "Then stop. Life is too short to be with the wrong person." "Soon," he promised. "I just need to set everything up correctly." I wondered what set everything up correctly meant. Was he planning to ask for alimony, to claim he had contributed to the household and deserved compensation? I pulled out my phone and texted my lawyer. Not the one at my firm. This had to be personal and completely confidential. Rhonda Vance, a divorce specialist I had referred clients to for years. The best in the city. Need a consultation ASAP. Personal matter. "How soon can you fit me in?" The reply came 3 minutes later. 9 a.m. tomorrow. My office. "Are you okay?" "I will be." I went back to the laptop. The program had completed its initial sync. I now had access to everything. Every email, every text, every photo, every browser search. I started scrolling through the browser history, finding the search queries he had performed. Divorce lawyer. How to claim spouse property rights. Alimony rights when wife makes more. He had been researching, planning, preparing to leave me while simultaneously figuring out how to take as much as he could with him. And all the while, he came home, kissed me on the cheek, asked how my day was, slept in our bed. I checked the photo folder. There she was, Simone, dozens of pictures of them together, coffee dates, dinner outings, her in his car laughing, him kissing her cheek, selfies of them in bed, thankfully clothed. But the intimacy was unmistakable. The photos dated back over the last 3 months, a visual chronology of everything I had been too busy to notice. In one photo, she was wearing a necklace I didn't recognize, delicate, expensive-looking. I cross-referenced the date with the credit card statements. A purchase at a jeweler for $6,000 2 weeks ago. I had assumed it was for me, for our upcoming anniversary. Maybe an early birthday gift. It had never been for me. I created a folder on my secure drive and began organizing everything. Screenshots of the email threads, the messages, the photos, the credit card statements, the phone records. I was building a case against my husband with the same meticulous care I would give to any legal brief. Proof of the affair, documented. Proof of the financial planning to profit from the divorce, documented. The timeline of deception, documented. By the time I finished, it was 5:30 p.m. My husband was due home in an hour. Later, actually, since according to his messages, he was planning to meet Simone at 7:30 p.m., which meant he would need an excuse. I didn't have to wait long. 6:15 p.m., my phone vibrated with a text from him. "Stuck at work last minute. Don't wait up for dinner. Love you. Love you." 2 words that used to mean everything. Now they were just sounds. Meaningless noise covering up the truth. I replied, "No problem. Going to bed early anyway. Still not feeling great. Get better, babe." I wondered if he felt any guilt at all, or if the lie had become so routine that it was just another task to check off. Text wife. Cover tracks, go to mistress. I had 3 hours before he would be home, maybe 4, depending on how long he stayed with her. I used that time to think, not about whether to leave him. That decision had been made the moment I saw those emails. You can't unknow something like that, can't unfeel the betrayal. The marriage was over, even if he didn't know it yet. I thought about how I could confront him tonight when he came home, throw the evidence in his face, scream, cry, demand answers to questions that no longer mattered. Or I could be smart. I was a real estate lawyer. I knew property law inside and out. I knew what was mine and what wasn't, what was defensible and what was vulnerable. And I knew that in a divorce, the person who plans wins. He had been planning, researching his rights, figuring out his strategy, all while keeping me in the dark. But he made one critical mistake. He underestimated me. The house was mine, bought with my inheritance, deeded in my name alone, with a clear paper trail showing separate property. He had signed documents acknowledging this. No matter how good his lawyer was, he would not get this house. Our cars were in our individual names. Mine was paid off. His SUV had 2 years of payments left, payments that came from our joint account, which I could close. Our bank accounts were joint, except for my investment portfolio, which was entirely separate. I could remove my share from the joint accounts, leave him his half, take mine, and close the door on that financial entanglement. I thought about timing. If I acted too fast, without proper legal counsel, I might make mistakes. But if I waited too long, he might make his move first. Tomorrow morning, I would meet Rhonda Vance and devise the legal strategy, and then I would execute it. But tonight I needed to see it with my own eyes. I knew where they were meeting. The message mentioned the usual spot, a wine bar in the Arts District I had never been to. Probably their place, full of memories I wasn't a part of. I could go and watch them together. Some would call it self-destructive that I already had all the evidence I needed, but I needed to see it, to witness the death of my marriage in real time, to etch it into my memory so that when he inevitably tried to gaslight me, to minimize it, to make me feel crazy for being hurt, I would have this. I would have the image of him with her, living the truth he had been hiding. I dressed, not the version of myself he knew, not the professional lawyer or the composed wife. I put on jeans, a simple black sweater, minimal makeup, pulled my hair back, and wore my glasses instead of contacts. I looked like a different person. I felt like a different person. At 7:15 p.m., I got in my car and drove downtown. The wine bar was called the Obscura. Of course, it was tucked into a converted warehouse in the Arts District, the kind of place with exposed ductwork and Edison bulbs and a carefully curated selection of natural wines that cost $50 a glass. Through the large front windows, I could see the warm glow of the interior lighting. People were clustered at small tables, laughing and talking in the animated way people do at the beginning of an evening when they are still fresh, still hopeful about how the night might unfold. I parked 2 blocks across the street, far enough away to be unseen and close enough to observe. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. That surprised me. I expected shaking, tears, some physical manifestation of the emotional earthquake happening inside me. But I felt calm, cold, almost as if I had stepped outside my body and was watching this happen to someone else. Maybe it was shock, or maybe this was who I became when the worst happened. Not the woman who fell apart, but the woman who observed, documented, prepared. At 7:28 p.m., his car pulled up. The black SUV he insisted on leasing 3 years ago. The one I privately thought was a cliché, but supported anyway because it made him happy. He circled the block once, looking for parking. Finally found a spot 2 cars ahead of me. I slunk down in my seat, though it wasn't necessary. He wasn't looking for me, wasn't thinking of me at all. His thoughts were likely of her, the evening ahead, the life he was building in secret, while our marriage quietly died of neglect and betrayal. He got out of the car, and I watched him check his reflection in the window, smooth his hair, adjust his collar. He was wearing the blue shirt I bought him for his birthday, the one I told him brought out his eyes. He wore it for her. He walked into the bar with the confident, easy stride of a man going toward what he wanted. I waited 30 seconds, then got out of my car. The November air was sharp, biting through my sweater. I had left my coat in the car. Good. The cold helped, kept me sharp. I walked toward the Obscura. My heart was pounding, though my hands were still steady. Through the window, I could see him at a table in the back. She wasn't there yet. He was looking at his phone, smiling at something. Probably a message from her saying she was almost there. I couldn't go inside, too risky, but the bar had a side patio. I could see it from the street. Heaters glowed in the evening gloom, and the patio connected to the main room through open French doors. If I positioned myself just right, I could see their table. I walked around to the patio entrance. A few people were seated at the outside tables, bundled up in coats, determined to enjoy the atmosphere despite the chill. I chose a corner table, partially concealed by a potted tree, ordered a glass of red wine from the waiter who appeared, and turned my chair so I could see through the doors. Perfect sightline. At 7:35 p.m., Simone arrived. I saw her before he did, watched her survey the room, her face lighting up when she spotted him. She was wearing the blue dress, the one he told her to wear, and she looked beautiful. The same ethereal quality I noticed at the dinner party, amplified by the warm lighting and the sheer joy on her face. She walked to his table. He stood up. They hugged, and the hug lasted too long to be casual. When they drew apart, he left his hands on her waist for a moment, looking at her with an expression I recognized. I had seen that look before, years ago when he looked at me like that. They sat down. A waiter appeared immediately. They were clearly regulars. They ordered without looking at the menu. When the waiter left, they leaned in close across the table, hands intertwined, talking with the intensity of people who have too much to say and not enough time to say it. I picked up my glass and took a sip. I couldn't taste it. From my vantage point, I could see them clearly, but I couldn't hear their conversation. I could only watch, read the body language, fill in the blanks with my imagination, which was somehow worse than knowing. She laughed at something he said, throwing her head back. Her hand reached across the table to touch his. He turned his palm up, caught her fingers, and held them. Such a small gesture, meaningless to anyone else in the restaurant, devastating to me. The wine arrived at their table. He had brought the promised Malbec. The waiter poured. They raised their glasses and they clinked together, a sound I didn't hear but could imagine. Clink. Clink. A promise made in wine. They drank. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. I watched him be present with her in a way he hadn't been with me in years, maybe ever. He was leaning forward, engaged, animated, laughing. She said something, and he actually put a hand over his heart, feigning injury, and she laughed even louder. They had their in-jokes, a rhythm, a history that existed in a space I could never penetrate, no matter how many emails I read or messages I scrolled through. And something about that hurt more than the physical betrayal, the knowledge that he had this entire other life, this entire other personality he reserved for her. The best parts of himself offered freely, while I got the scraps. The tired, resentful, disconnected version that came home, scrolled his phone, and made me feel like I was asking too much by wanting a conversation. My hand tightened around the glass. I forced myself to loosen my grip before it cracked. Their food came. They ordered appetizers to share. I watched them eat from each other's plates, casually, comfortably. The waiter came over and they both smiled at her with the warmth of people who are exactly where they want to be. At one point, Simone got up to go to the restroom. He watched her walk away, his eyes following her across the room with open admiration. Once she was gone, he pulled out his phone, typed something. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. A text from him. "This work thing is dragging on longer than expected. We'll probably be home around 11 p.m. Sorry, babe." I stared at the message, the casual lie, the reflexive deceit, the sorry that meant nothing. I typed back, "It's okay, no rush." I watched him read my reply, watched him smile faintly and put the phone away, feeling no guilt, just as Simone returned to the table. She sat down, and he immediately reached for her hand again, said something that made her eyes soften. She whispered something back. I couldn't read her lips, but it looked like "I love you." The stem of the glass bent slightly in my hand. I forced myself to loosen my grip before it broke. I had to leave. I had all the evidence I needed. Sitting here and tormenting myself served no purpose except to add fresh wounds to an already fatal injury. But I couldn't move. I watched them finish their meal, watched them order dessert, 1 plate, 2 forks, watched them feed each other bites with the involuntary intimacy of people who had done this before, many times. I watched my husband be happy, and I realized, sitting there in the cold, my wine untouched, that this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a midlife crisis or any of the other explanations people use to soften the edges of betrayal. This was a choice he made over and over again. Every text, every email, every lie, every moment he could have stopped but didn't. He chose this, he chose her, and in doing so, he unchose me. The waiter brought them the check. He paid it with our joint credit card, I noted with bitter irony, paying for his date with my money. They stood up to leave. He helped her put on her coat, his hands lingering on her shoulders. They walked toward the exit together, and for a moment I thought they would walk past the patio, right past me. But they turned the other way, toward the front door. I waited until they were outside, until I could see them through the window, walking toward his car, watched him open her passenger door, watched her stand on her tiptoes to kiss him before she got in. A real kiss, not long, but not casual. The kiss of people who fully intended to continue this later, somewhere private, probably the hotel, the same one or a new one. Another receipt. Another 4 hours he would steal from our marriage to give to her. His car pulled away from the curb. I watched the taillights disappear around the corner. Only then did I realize I was crying. Not sobbing, just tears, quiet and steady, running down my face in the cold night air. I wiped them with the back of my hand and looked at my glass, still full. I hadn't taken a sip except for the first one. I left cash on the table. Too much, but I didn't care, and walked back to my car. The drive home was automatic. I don't remember most of it. My body knew the way. Muscle memory guided me through the turns and traffic lights while my mind processed what I had seen. By the time I pulled into our driveway, my driveway, the tears had stopped. By the time I unlocked the front door and walked into our house, my home, I was transformed. The woman who drove to that wine bar in the hope that she was wrong, in the hope that there was some explanation, in the hope that her marriage could be saved, that woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, colder, someone who understood that mercy is wasted on people who have already shown you who they truly are. I went to the bedroom, changed into my pajamas, washed my face, went through all the motions of normalcy. Then I got into bed, set my alarm for 8 a.m., and fell asleep. I slept deeply, dreamlessly, for the first time in weeks. When I woke up to my alarm, my husband was still not home. Rhonda Vance had the kind of office that was designed to be both soothing and intimidating. Soft leather chairs, a mahogany desk, shelves lined with legal volumes and, more tellingly, family law awards. On the wall behind her desk hung her credentials: Ivy League Law School, clerkship for a federal judge, 30 years of experience. She didn't conduct consultations, she engaged in tactical planning. "Tell me everything," she said when I sat down. I told her. I showed her the emails, the messages, the photos, the credit card statements, the hotel receipt. I showed her the house documents, the deed in my name, the paper trail of my inheritance, the affirmation signed by my husband. She reviewed it all with the focused attention of someone reading a battle plan, which I suppose it was. When she finished, she looked up at me. "How do you feel?" The question surprised me. Not, "What do you want to do?" or "Here are your options," but "How do you feel?" "I'm angry," I said honestly. "Good. Anger is useful. Anger motivates action." She leaned back in her chair. "Here's what you need to understand. You are in a very strong position. The house is clearly your separate property. Your inheritance is protected. Based on those searches he was performing, he plans to claim some kind of financial share, but he has no legal standing. What about alimony? Possible, but unlikely. You've been married 7 years, just under the threshold where long-term support becomes more common. You earn more than he does. He is employed. Any alimony would be minimal and temporary. She paused. Unless he quits his job before you file. I hadn't thought of that. Would he? People do desperate things in a divorce. If he's unemployed at the time of filing, he can make a stronger claim for support. She tapped a pen on the desk, which is why we need to move fast and we need to move strategically. Tell me how. Over the next hour, Rhonda laid out the plan. First, I was to secure all my separate assets, move the money out of our joint accounts, only my share, clean and documented, change the passwords on my individual accounts, and remove my name from any shared credit cards while paying my portion of the balance. Second, I was to secure the house, change the locks, which I had every legal right to do as the sole owner, and pack his belongings for eviction. Third, I was to file for divorce before he did, getting ahead of the narrative, controlling the process. You have to understand something, Rhonda said, her tone serious. Once you start this process, there's no going back, and it will be ugly. He will feel blindsided. He may become angry, try to negotiate, may make promises. You have to be absolutely certain this is what you want. I thought of the wine bar, his hand on hers, the lies. I'm certain. Then let's proceed. By noon, I had retained Rhonda, signed documents, and received a detailed checklist of actions to take. I sat in my car, in her parking lot, and called my bank. I need to make some changes to my accounts, I told the representative. Within the hour, I had moved my money out of our joint checking and savings accounts. I left his contributions. I calculated it precisely, looking through the last year's statements. I only took what was mine, defensible. I closed our joint credit cards, paying the balance in full, my share and his. I wanted no lingering financial ties. I called our insurance company and separated the policy, called the utility services, and put everything in my name. By 3 p.m., I had systematically dismantled our shared financial life. Next, I called a locksmith. I need all the locks on my house changed today, if possible. We can send someone by 5 p.m. Excellent. Then I called a moving company. I need someone's belongings packed and moved to a storage unit tomorrow morning. How quickly can you do that? They could have a team there by 9 a.m. I sat in my car in the parking lot, making phone calls, erasing my husband from my life with the efficiency I usually reserved for closing real estate deals. It felt powerful. It felt right. At 4 p.m., I drove home. My husband's car wasn't there. According to the location tracking he had forgotten to turn off on our plan, he was at his office. Actually, at his office this time, apparently. I walked through the house room by room, looking at it with new eyes. It was mine, all of it. Every piece of furniture I chose, every paint color I selected, every upgrade I financed. He lived here, but he never truly invested in it, not financially, not emotionally. It had always been my home. Now it would be only my home. The locksmith arrived at 5:15 p.m. By 6 p.m., I had new keys and the deep satisfaction of knowing that my husband's key would no longer work in those locks. I ordered takeout, ate it at the kitchen island, reviewing the documents Rhonda had sent me. The petition for divorce was drafted, ready to be filed. I just needed to sign it, and she would submit it to the court in the morning. My phone vibrated. A text from my husband. Working late again. Don't wait up for dinner. I knew what working late meant now. I knew exactly where he was and with whom. I replied, okay. No love you. No see you later. Just an acknowledgement. He didn't seem to notice. At 9 p.m., I went into his office. I had already called the moving company and told them to pack everything in this room, his desk, his files, his books, his precious, organized workspace. But first, I wanted to leave him something. I drafted an email on my laptop. When you read this, you will find that your key no longer works. This is not a mistake. This house is my separate property, as you affirmed in writing when I purchased it. You are no longer a welcome guest here. Your belongings will be packed and moved to a storage unit tomorrow. You will receive the address and access code through your lawyer. I have filed for divorce. You will be served with the papers within the next few days. I know about Simone. I know about the affair, the hotel visits, the lies, and the plans you were making to leave me while simultaneously figuring out how to take as much money as you could on your way out. Do not insult me by attempting to deny or minimize this. Our joint accounts have been separated. I have taken only what is mine. Your share remains in your individual account. Our credit cards are closed. You are responsible for your own expenses going forward. Do not contact me directly. All communication must go through our attorneys. My counsel is Rhonda Vance of Vance and Partners. I advise you to retain counsel immediately. This marriage is over. I read it 3 times, removed all emotion, all accusation, any opportunity for argument, making it clean, factual, final. Then I saved it as a draft. I would send it tomorrow after everything was in motion, after the locks were changed, his things were packed, and the divorce papers were filed, after there was no going back. I went to bed at 10 p.m. My husband was still not home. I checked the location tracking. He was at a hotel, the same one as the receipt. I turned off my phone and fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, my husband was sleeping beside me. He must have come in late, slipped into bed without waking me. The scent of her perfume was faint but present on his skin. I quietly got up, showered, and dressed in a business suit, as if I were going to court, because in a sense, I was. I was going to war. The moving company arrived exactly at 9 a.m. 3 men with boxes, dollies, and efficient, professional demeanor. Everything in the office, I told them, and his clothing from the bedroom closet. I had marked which items were his this morning while he was still asleep, placed post-it notes on his suits, his shoes, his dresser, made it easy for them. My husband appeared in the hallway, bleary-eyed, confused. What is going on? Are you moving out? You are moving out, I said calmly. He stared at me. What do you mean, moving out? Who are these people? These people are packing your things. A storage unit has been leased in your name. You will receive the address and access code later today. This is a joke. He looked at the movers, who professionally ignored our conversation, and continued their work. Hey, stop. There's been some mistake. No mistake, I said. This is my home. I am asking you to leave. His face cycled through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, rage. You can't just throw me out. I live here. I can. This house is my separate property. You have no legal claim to it. Check with your lawyer if you don't believe me. What the hell is this about? His voice was rising now. Did someone say something to you? It's about Simone, I said quietly. It's about the affair you've been having for the last 3 months, the hotel visits, the lies, and the plans you were making to leave me while simultaneously figuring out how to take as much money as you could on your way out. I know everything, I continued, my voice level. The emails, the messages, the credit card charges, all of it. Do not insult me by trying to deny it. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain. I'm filing for divorce. You will be served with the papers within the next few days. Our finances are already separated. Your belongings are being packed right now, and your key will no longer work in those locks. You changed the locks? Disbelief and anger fought for dominance in his tone. You can't do that. I already did. He took a step toward me, and I held up a hand. Don't. The movers are witnesses. My lawyer has documented everything. If you want to make this harder than it has to be, you will only hurt yourself. I live here, he repeated, as if repetition would make it true. You lived here, past tense. Now you need to figure out where you're going to live. Where am I supposed to go? He asked, and for the first time he sounded small. That's no longer my problem. I pulled the printed email from my pocket. I had decided to hand it to him personally, rather than sending it. This explains everything. Read it when you calm down and hire a lawyer. You're going to need one. I handed him the paper and walked back into my bedroom, my room now, and closed the door. Through the wood, I could hear him on the phone. First Simone, his voice quiet and urgent. Then a lawyer, I assume. His tone shifted to desperate and pleading. None of it mattered. By noon, the movers were finished. His office was empty. His clothes were gone. The house looked bigger, cleaner, as if something heavy had been removed. I stood by the window and watched the truck pull away, carrying the physical remnants of my marriage to a storage unit I would never visit. My phone rang. Rhonda. "The papers are filed," she said. "He'll be served tomorrow." "Thank you. How do you feel?" I looked around my house. My space, my future, no longer entangled with the man who betrayed me. "I feel fine," I said, and I meant it. 6 weeks later, I was standing in the same marble lobby where this story began, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as my now ex-husband pressed the intercom buzzer for the final time before giving up. The divorce was finalized this morning. Quick, clean, exactly as Rhonda predicted. He tried to fight, of course, hired a lawyer who made noise about his contributions to the household, emotional distress, the unfairness of leaving him with nothing. But the law was clear. The house was mine. The inheritance was mine. And after 7 years of marriage, with our finances meticulously separated, he had no claim. He walked away with his personal items, his SUV with the remaining payments, and half of our minimal joint savings. Everything he brought into the marriage, he took out of it, no more. Simone took him in at first. I heard through mutual acquaintances, the ones who quietly chose my side once the story surfaced, that they tried to make a go of it. The grand love affair, finally free to exist in the light. But apparently, a romance is different from a relationship. The thrill of secret meetings, stolen moments, and forbidden love translates poorly into the mundane reality of bills, obligations, and the daily grind of actual partnership. They lasted 5 weeks before she asked him to move out. He was now living in a studio apartment across town, working the same job, driving the same SUV, probably wondering how his life had fallen apart so quickly. I didn't pity him. I felt free. The house was still mine, but it felt different now. I renovated his office, turning it into a reading room with built-in bookshelves and a comfortable chair by the window. I repainted the bedroom, changed the bedding, made everything new. My career was thriving. Without the emotional drain of a dying marriage, I had energy to invest in my work. I had taken on 2 major clients in the last month, handling cases that used to stress me out with a calm confidence that surprised even me. I started running in the mornings, joined a book club, reconnected with friends I had neglected during those years of trying to save a marriage that was already gone. I was building a life, not the one I planned, not the future I envisioned when I said yes to a breakfast proposal 8 years ago, but mine, completely, wholly mine. Sometimes late at night, I thought of the woman I used to be, the one who walked into that upscale restaurant and sat across from her husband's ex-girlfriend, smiling through the pain of being compared and found wanting. That woman believed that love meant holding on, that commitment meant enduring, that a good wife made herself smaller so her husband could feel bigger. That woman was gone. In her place was someone who understood that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference, and that the most powerful thing you can do when someone betrays you is not to seek dramatic revenge or make them suffer. It is to remove them from your life with the same careful precision with which you remove a tumor, completely, totally, finally, forever. I watched the figure of my ex-husband walk away down the sidewalk, his shoulders slumped, alone. Then I turned from the window, walked to the elevator, and rode up to my home. The doors closed behind me, and I smiled. Not because I had won, though I had, but because I realized that the best revenge isn't making someone homeless or broke or miserable. It's building a life so full, so rich, so wholly yours, that their absence becomes irrelevant. He thought he could use me as a safety net while he planned his future with someone else. Instead, he taught me that I never needed him at all, and that lesson, however painful it was, set me free. The elevator reached my floor. I stepped out into the hallway, pulled out my new key, the copy of which only I possessed, and unlocked the door. Inside, everything was exactly as I had left it. Quiet, calm, mine. I slipped off my shoes, poured myself a glass of wine, and walked over to the window that overlooked the city. Out there somewhere, he was figuring out his next move, wondering what went wrong. maybe even telling himself a story where he was the victim. I had far more important things to do than think about a man who had already taken up too much of my time. I had a life to live, and it was going to be extraordinary. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.